25 fourth graders ganged up on our substitute teacher, and she was crying too hard to call for help. Our regular teacher said on Friday, "I'm going to be out the whole next week for surgery," and the whole class groaned because we hated having substitutes. Monday morning, we walked into class and saw a woman we'd never seen before, standing at the front with a box of metallic gold Sharpies on the desk. And I perked up thinking we were doing some kind of art project all week. I could not have been more wrong. First period started with math review, and a kid in the back gave a wrong answer. And instead of correcting him, the sub walked calmly to her desk and pulled out a gold Sharpie. She went over and wrote wrong on the back of his hand while the class watched in silence. And then she said, "This is how I teach accountability, so you remember your mistakes." She smiled at all of us and said, "I'm here all week, so we're going to learn a lot together." A girl who hesitated before answering got slow on her wrist, and a boy who didn't start his worksheet fast enough got lazy up his forearm in bigger letters. She grabbed my wrist and wrote "messy" across the back of my hand for sloppy handwriting, and I felt the marker dig into my skin while she held me in place, and something hot started building in my chest. By first recess, 5 of us had been marked, and we stood comparing gold letters without knowing who to tell. After recess, she started hunting for excuses, and a girl who whispered to her neighbor got loud across her throat before she could apologize. A boy who dropped his pencil got clumsy on the side of his neck, and I watched her eyes while she wrote, and I swear she looked happy. By lunch, half the class had gold on their skin, and we crowded into the bathroom scrubbing with wet paper towels, but it barely faded, and I kept looking at my hand and feeling that hot thing in my chest growing. After lunch, a boy's eyes watered after getting yelled at, and she smiled and wrote "baby" on both his cheeks right where the tears fell. A girl raised her hand and said, "Can I go to the nurse? I don't feel good," and got weak across her forehead, and that was the first time she'd gone for someone's face. By second recess, almost every one of us had been branded, and she looked around the room at our gold-covered skin like she was admiring her work. We gathered by the swings, and a kid said, "We should tell the principal," but we were scared she'd do worse, and I stood there with my marked hand clenched into a fist. Final hour started with her calling on the sweet autistic boy who sat in the front row, the one everyone in our class loved and looked out for. He got confused by the question and started stimming, rocking slightly in his seat, and the sub watched him with her head tilted like she was looking at something disgusting and said, "What's wrong with you?" He tried to answer but stumbled, and she walked to her desk and pulled out a Sharpie while we all held our breath. She took her time crossing the room and stood over him and wrote a word across his forehead that I'm not going to repeat, and the room went dead silent. He didn't understand what she'd written, but he could feel everyone staring and his eyes filled with tears. And I looked at his face and saw that ugly gold word, and every muscle in my body went tight. My eyes went to the box of Sharpies on her desk. 25. I counted the kids in our class. 25. I made eye contact with every single classmate without saying anything, because I didn't need to say anything. She went to write on the whiteboard, and we moved in silence, one by one, walking to the desk and grabbing Sharpies and passing them back until every kid was holding one. She finished writing and turned around, and every fourth grader was standing at their desk with a gold metallic Sharpie in their hand. Her face went pale, and she said, "Sit down and put those back immediately." But nobody moved. She reached for the phone on the wall, and 3 kids stepped into her path. She moved toward the door, and 5 more blocked it. She was spinning now, looking for a way out, and everywhere she turned, there were more kids closing in with Sharpies uncapped and ready. She screamed, "Get back!" and tried to shove through, but there were too many of us, and 25 markers touched her at once. She was thrashing and swatting, but every time she pushed one kid away, 3 more were already writing. I saw cruel go on her cheek, and monster go on her arm, and mean go across her hand, and evil go on her neck, and she was shrieking and spinning and trying to cover herself, but there was nowhere to hide. She tripped backward and hit the floor hard, and kids swarmed around her still writing, her arms and legs and face covered in overlapping gold letters while she sobbed, "Please stop, please stop." The other kids stepped back, and I walked forward and knelt down next to her tear-streaked face and wrote 2 words across her forehead in big gold letters, "Ableist garbage," with a little gold heart next to it to soften the blow to her ego. She looked up at me, and I didn't say anything. She curled into a ball on the floor, crying too hard to move. The dismissal bell rang, and none of us moved. The principal found her on the floor covered in 25 golden words and 25 kids standing in perfect silence, and she never taught anywhere again.